Hey everybody, Darren from the White Hatter, and welcome to today's Thinkable Thursday. And today, I have the pleasure to interview not only a colleague, but a good friend of mine by the name of Tad Milmine. And he runs an organization called Bullying Ends Here, and he's also a serving police officer here in Canada. We're going to speak to him in just a moment. Let's bring a little bit about Tad. So here he is, and yes, he is Canadian, eh? And he runs his organization called Bullying Ends Here, and he's also a serving police officer with the Calgary Police Department. He'll give you a little bit about his background. What's really cool about Tad is he also has his own website. There it is. And I highly, highly, highly recommend everybody who's watching this, if you want more information on who Tad is and what he does with his organization, please connect with him on that website right there. And he is also a published author. There's his book. We have his book. We've read his book. Just a good, really good book about who he is and his story. So why don't we bring him into screen? There he is. Love your background. Love your background, Tad. How you doing, my friend?
Absolutely awesome. Thanks. How are you?
I'm really well. How are you surviving COVID right now?
Interesting times for me, as it is for everybody else out there, but one day at a time and trying to make the best of, what's being handed to us.
Why don't you share with our audience who you are, what you do, how Bullying Ends Here came about, the who, what, where, when, why, and how?
Oh my. Well, it's my name is Tad Milmine, as you mentioned, and I am a serving member with the Calgary Police Service. I'm in my sixth year with them. I also had 6 years with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, or the RCMP as they're affectionately known. So I guess I'm in my 13th year of policing now. Love absolutely every moment of it. I'm a frontline officer. That means if someone calls for emergency services, I'd be one of the first to arrive. On my days off, I like to still keep busy. So,
do you have days off?
What's that?
Do you have days off?
I guess it's all just in the perspective of the person describing those. But on the days that I'm not in the office doing police work, then or out on the street doing police work, then I'm running Bullying Ends Here, as you alluded to earlier, and that's a charity where I take a bit of a unique approach. It's more along the lines of just opening up and sharing my story and challenges that I faced growing up, how I felt, the struggles I had, and how I found a way to get through it all while holding on to that dream all along that I wanted to be a police officer.
So how about if we hold on to that, because it kind of dovetails nicely into the first question I have for you. So the first question I have for you, Tad, is what spawned Bullying Ends Here? I mean, you're kind of going down that path anyways. So why not ask the question? Go.
Wow, it's it's a combination of two things, but neither one did I really envision happening. So I'll allude on that a bit. I'll expand on that by saying, my life growing up was a challenging one. At 5 years old, my parents divorced. I lived with my father and a stepmother. There were addictions in that home. I was abused, neglected, confined to a basement for 12 years. I was an exceptionally introverted young man growing up. So being confined to a basement by myself with no TV, no toys, no extracurricular activities, when you only have yourself, I guess you just find a way to survive. And that's what I did. But my only escape from the basement was to go to school. But being so shy and obviously not socially adapted to deal with other people, the kids at school at a young age, they homed in on that. And that caused me a lot of grief because I was severely bullied all through school. I held everything in, as a lot of victims do, and you kind of just hold on to that little bit of hope. And for me, as I mentioned, it was to be a police officer. That was my ultimate goal. Mm-hmm. Fast forward to surviving the basement, living on my own, developing and creating essentially the person that I am today. I had found a way to bury my past, to accept it as it wasn't my fault. It was something I experienced, however, and got professional help with those issues growing up. having achieved my dream, there was one evening I'll never forget it. I had just finished my 12-hour day in Surrey, BC, and gone home, laying in bed, reading the news as I do every day. And one headline caught my attention. It says, Ottawa teenager takes his own life because of severe bullying. And you know what happened in that moment? It's I still to this day, even telling this story over 1,000 times, I still lack the words to try to really capture what happened. But it was like everything from my past flooded back, everything about this young man named Jamie Hubley, a young person that I'd never met before. It was almost like it's like immediately I just knew who he was. It was like he was a longtime friend. He was in a way, it was like reading about myself. It's so in that moment of reading his story, and I'll go into a little bit of detail in just a moment, but when I finished reading that story, I just remember thinking to myself, it's time. I have to do something about this. I have to get out and just share my story. And never once was I thinking on an international stage or even on a school stage. I was more just thinking, you know what, I'm going to put a Facebook post out or, you know, something like that, just to let it out and just start that conversation that it's okay to have had struggles or challenges. It's okay to have ups and downs. In fact, it's perfectly normal, but we're not talking about it. So when we're experiencing it, we truly feel alone and isolated, where if we were to have the conversations, maybe we'd recognize that we're far from alone, we're far from isolated. Sometimes the only reason why we feel that way is because of ourselves. We put ourselves in this, you know, cage almost, and because we're so afraid or ashamed of what we're experiencing, without realizing that there's help and support and similar experiences in people all around us. So to go to Jamie's story, in a nutshell, at 5 years old, he shared with his parents he wanted to be a figure skater. His parents were very welcoming and accepting. Jamie excelled, exploded at the opportunity. But kids at school figured out he was a figure skater. And unfortunately, there are some stereotypes that go along with that. And again, we're talking almost 10 years ago.
Right.
Jamie was relentlessly bullied. It was, I mean, we'll call it what it was. It was assault. It was threats. It was harassment. And Jamie struggled with mental illness and sexuality. When he was 15 years old, he did come out as openly gay. His family, again, very accepting. He had a very good support network around him, loving, caring friends. But the evil around him when it came to the bullying at school was just too much for him to handle, especially when you add in the struggles of mental illness. And at 15, he found no other way out, and he took his own life. And it was at that moment that I just, like I said, I realized I wanted to do something. And, you know, in your heart of hearts, when you know you're doing the right thing, you don't question it. You almost don't even ask permission. You just do it. And
I think there's a company that has that as a slogan, right?
Yes. And a swoosh. Is that what it is?
Yeah. Nike, right? Just do it.
Right.
Don't try it, just do it, right?
Just do it. Yeah. And it's true. And a lot of people ask me, like, how did I do it? And the fact is, I don't have any secret answers. I didn't go to school to become a public speaker. In fact, I mean, Darren, I've told you many times, I'm extremely uncomfortable with public speaking, but sometimes you got to challenge yourself and just do it. You need to put your own discomfort aside, knowing that in that time you're going to have with that young person or any person for all that matters, that you might have a very positive impact. And as far as I'm concerned, for me to be uncomfortable for an hour, then it's worth it. It's worth putting that aside.
You know, I think the special sauce, every really good public speaker has got passion. If you're passionate about your topic, then even if you have the worst material, your audience is going to love you, because it's all about passion, right? And I think you bring that passion to the table based upon your experiences and what it is that you're doing to your job. And I think that that's the special sauce that you have.
Well, thank you. It's I find it hard to accept any sort of compliments. I mean, technically just in life, but especially when it comes to bullying and here, because I don't know. It's it's just my story. And I think from my perspective, I'm so stuck in that's all it is. It's just my story. And and I still can't really grasp why it's doing so well with young people, especially around the world. But at the same time, if I can remember back to being in high school, I still say that I wish I was around when I was in high school. I wish my adult self was around when I was in high school, because I wish that we had that style of presentation. It's not for everyone, don't get me wrong, but I wish we had someone that would go up without videos, without a marching band, without pyrotechnics, and just say, hey, here's me, here's what I went through, and it was hard, but I made it, and if I can make it, anybody can make it.
Next question, Tad. Just recently, you completed a cross-Canada tour where you started on the West Coast and drove east. Although you were the presenter, what did you learn from teens from across Canada specific to the topics of bullying, right? Sometimes the teacher becomes the student. A lot of times, good presenters become the student, right? So what did you learn in your cross-Canada tour?
Well, I think the one thing that I always kind of call myself is I'm a sponge. I don't pretend at all to be the be all and end all when it comes to bullying. I want to learn. Everything is morphing with time, especially compared to when I was a young person to nowadays, because we have the internet with social media. So I ask a lot of questions, whether it's the police officer that may have been responsible for putting the presentation together, to the principal, social workers, teachers in the school, counselors. But for me, most importantly, it's the youth. It's not only the questions that they ask at the end of the presentation in a group setting, sometimes in the hundreds and over 1,000, but in the messages at night. And the one thing, well, multiple things I've come to recognize is bullying. It's everywhere. It's not just a big city. It's not just a small town. It's absolutely everywhere. It's no different from BC to Alberta to Nova Scotia. It's the same. And the struggles that our kids are going through are the same. They feel the same. They're struggling the same way. And I guess what I've come to understand is that the struggles that they're going through it's the same everywhere. Mm-hmm. But across this country, we have a mismatch of piecework. Of we're going to do this in this province, we're going to do this in this province, the school district's going to do this, the police will do this, and we don't really have anything static across the country. It's kind of everyone's doing their own thing, and I guess that's what happens when you have schools responsible for themselves, and then you have school districts, and then you have the provinces for education, and then you've got the country. I guess really it would be from the criminal aspect with the Criminal Code of Canada. It gives, if it gets to the point of police being involved, then we have, some rules and guides to work off of that way.
So, based upon what you just said there, do you think that that's one of the bigger challenges that we face as a country then, is that to get our hands around this, is that we are somewhat siloed?
Very much so. That's the perfect word. It's again, I don't pretend to be an expert on anything, but just my observations from talking to everyone. I can't tell you the number of faculty in a school that they tell me that they have a policy saying zero tolerance. But then when I say, well, what does that mean? They'll look at me and say, well, that's the question. What does that mean? It's. I think that's probably the only static phrase we have across this country in schools, is that bullying we have zero tolerance for. And that's awesome. That's terrific. But when you ask the follow-up questions of, well, what does that mean? What happens if someone is responsible for bullying, or what happens to the victims? And one would argue, what happens to the bystanders? Because there's a lot of education and learning and disciplines that can be taken away. And every school is different. Everywhere in the country is different, and we have so many experts, but when it comes to the silos, well, they're siloed.
And what's interesting, I think the reason why a lot of schools, to be quite honest with you, the only reason they have this thing called zero tolerance for violence, it's called liability.
Yeah.
It protects them from liability. But yes. I think you've nailed it. What does that mean? Define it. are there exceptions to the rule? Which there should be. What are those exceptions? You're right. How does it affect the entire school community? Not just the aggressor and the survivor, but what about the teacher? What about the bystanders? What about the families? I mean, like, it's that holistic approach that you were just talking about, right?
And I'll share with you something. It's of all the schools. So I've been to, I'm going to say 1,200 schools, vast majority in Canada, but at least 100 overseas. I went to one school in London, England, and it's unfathomable from a Canadian aspect or perspective to try to think of what's happened. But remember, they've been doing this since the start of time. So it's not they developed and said, okay, go. They've been doing this. So what they do is they do a parent buy-in at the start of every school year. That means the parent needs to read the rules, and I'll speak right now about bullying. And it's laid out. It says zero tolerance, but then it says if your child is involved in, and I'm just, going off the seat of my pants, but it would be, you know what, your first offense, this is what happens. And that is that day after school, you're held back for 1 hour. It doesn't matter if you're the football coach or team captain and you got the biggest game of the year. It doesn't matter if you have a doctor's appointment. It doesn't matter. You are 1 hour at the end of that school day. You're going to sit down with the counselor and discuss, what took place from that person's perspective. And then you sign an agreement at that point as a student moving forward that, here's where I'm going to improve. Here's the things I'm going to personally work on. Here's the things I'm not going to do again. If you have a second offense, then you're immediately removed from the school. They err on the side of caution to protect the victim and to work with the bully. And I believe that's for 1 or maybe 3 days. But what I'm getting at is it's all laid out. And if the parent doesn't agree to this at the start of the school year, the student doesn't go to that school. It's just that simple. So you have the parent buy-in at the start of the year. Then what the teachers do is when the students are in between classes, every single teacher lines up in their doorway and they watch the students walk down the halls. There is no talking to one another whatsoever. There is no cell phones. The cell phones aren't even allowed in the schools, period. If you need to get in touch with your child or remind them of a dentist appointment, for instance, you call the school and remind them or send them to school with a note so they remember. Mm-hmm. It's kind of all basics, right? But you need the parent buy-in from the start. You need the teacher buy-in to go from there, and then you need to follow through on the administration side that if something happens that they follow their rules, and follow.
What you're describing there is something I call informed policy, right? It's great to have it, but if it's not informed, then what good is it? Now, having traveled across Canada, Tad, did you notice that maybe there was one province in particular where they were doing better or could kind of be like a role model for the rest of Canada?
Yes, hands down, Nova Scotia. That's
where the lawyer was from that I spoke to today, by the way, and he was involved in the drafting of what happened there. And he was quite critical of the first legislation that came forward, very critical. In fact, he argued they wouldn't survive a court challenge, which it didn't. But let's hear your thoughts on what's going on in Nova Scotia.
Well, I think the reason why I say Nova Scotia is because when the incident took place, it's that
was Rehtaeh Parsons, right?
It was Rehtaeh Parsons, yeah. There was a knee-jerk reaction from the government to come up with legislation right away. Yeah. And as you and I know with our line of work, everyone means well. They think it through. They talk to some experts. But in society, you can have all the experts in the world, but there's somebody else that's going to fight to go against what you created. And whether that's a test in courts or whatever it is, it takes time to get through that. But not only did they have the legislation, but they had documentation that was very easy to read. You and I, alluded to that earlier. Something that's just in plain terms, easy to read. None of this talking about statistics or talking about, a study that was done in 2015, but the results are out today. It's just nice and easy to read. And then it provides you the resources if you want to go further into your research as an individual or want to read about legislation or all that really great stuff that keeps us up late at night, then you can go. But they had policies in schools. They had assemblies, not necessarily people like myself, but assemblies from the faculty saying, okay, here's where the line in the sand is going to be drawn. They had the educational understanding about, and I know you've already spoken about this in your platforms before, about young people and when it comes to sexting and having nude photos on their phone and sharing it amongst one another, and the cans and can't do's and all of those things. So it was just very impressive to be in a school there, and it was bright pink. So the literature was plastered on the walls all through the school. So there's no way of saying I didn't know. They made it age appropriate. Yeah. So they had it for your young students, and then they had it for the middle age, and then for the high schools.
Here's a fact you don't know. I was born and raised in Halifax, Nova Scotia for 10 years.
I did not know that.
I'm a blue noser. My dad was in the Navy. He got transferred out to Victoria. So I lived for my first 10 years on the East Coast, and then we moved to Victoria with the Navy, and I spent the rest of my time here. So yeah, I'm a blue noser, and I'm happy. In fact, the lawyer that I spoke with today, David, him and I were joking more about that. And I'm not going to lie to you, every so often I have a little bit of me going, Beth and I have been back to Nova Scotia twice. It reminds us a lot of Victoria, especially Halifax, right? Yeah. Just a really cool province. But it really interesting to hear from your perspective, because you've traveled across the country. You've seen what all the schools are doing. So next question I have for you is, in a tweet you stated, there is no one-way-fits-all solution to bullying. Each case is different, and we must look into the root causes. Can you expand on that comment for it? We kind of were alluding to it a little bit in the last question, but how about if you dig deeper down into that one for me?
Well, I'll start off by saying this is what I was so intrigued by that school in London, because that first hour of, if you were to allege it to have a first incident, it's not about guilt, it's not about punishment. It's a form of discipline. So it's about sitting down with a counselor and talking about what happened. So it's not just hey, that was wrong, that's rude, you're in detention, sitting by yourself in a classroom and think about what you've done. It's better than that. It's talk about what you've done. How did you feel? Why did you feel as though you did that? So it's the interesting part that I find is that every case of bullying is different. Especially when you're talking to young people, you need to figure out, what's going on in their life, because ultimately bullying is not natural. It's a behavior that's been taught. It's been learned. It's something that we have to understand, that if we're getting to the point of calling it bullying, it's way beyond being rude or mean or an inappropriate incident took place. Bullying is repetitive. It's been going on for weeks, months, maybe even years for some of these young people. So we can't also expect that by sitting someone down for an hour that we've resolved it, because now we have to unlearn that behavior. And for some young people, the environments they're growing up, you don't have to look very far of where they're learning to become a bully. And you and I, or a counselor or a social worker, can sit down with this young person for, every day they're in school. But the fact is, we only have them for a few hours, maybe 4 or 5 times a week. They're going home to where they're getting the majority of the time. And again, we're kind of losing some of the better gains that we've been making throughout the day.
Next question. Do you think schools are doing enough when it comes to preventing bullying, and is this just a school challenge? What do you think? I see a lot of parents putting a lot of, they abdicate, in my opinion, a lot of the responsibility to the school. Are they doing enough, and is this just a school issue?
Oh my goodness. Darren, you and I could speak about this for days, weeks, months, years. It's the simple answer is, I believe schools are doing a lot. They're doing a lot. But the fact is, again, we have to remember what bullying is. Bullying is repetitive. It's been going on for a very long time. It's targeted. A teacher has, I don't know what the actual numbers, but let's say one adult for every 30 students in a school. Bullying has never changed in the fact it is still very secretive. The one thing that has changed, as you know a lot more than I know, is a lot of it has morphed from the way it used to be when I was in school, being the playground, the hallway, the classroom. It's now morphed into the cell phone, the cyberbullying, the social media aspect. We can never expect, nor can we even lawfully assume that a teacher is going to be able to deal with that. If everything is already, I think I read a statistic the other day, 81% of the time it's without an adult present, which is on purpose. How can we expect a school to address it? I've said this many, many, many times. Bullying will start and it will end at home. If at a young age a parent does what, and full disclosure, I do not have children, so it's a little easier for me to say this than maybe it would be to act on it. But if the majority of bullying is taking place on the internet via a cell phone, if parents were to look at their children's phone just periodically with an understanding, it's not to get them in trouble, it's not to look for negative things, it's a way just to start earning trust and seeing the conversations they're having. I mean, could you imagine what a parent at a young age is going to learn about their child? They're going to see the photos that they've had, that they've taken, that they've shared with others. They're going to see the websites that their children at a very young age are visiting without any context to what they're seeing. And in this case, I'm referring to pornography. You've got the parents will see the way their child is interacting on social media with other people. They're going to see if their child is a bully as far as online behavior, or a victim, or a bystander. They're going to see all of these things, which means if this is done correctly, you're going to nip bullying in the bud a long time before it ever becomes bullying, because you're going to recognize something needs to be discussed at an early age, and you start working with your child as they grow, and then you earn that trust as far as privacy with the phone, with age.
I couldn't agree with you more. One of the things I say is that our kids have no right to privacy from us adults, but they can earn that right to privacy by showing us good digital literacy over time. Parents have the right to monitor, but there's a difference between monitoring and spying, right? Like Richard Geary, who's a colleague of mine in the United States, he uses this analogy, which I really like. Monitoring is like you're outside your child's bedroom door, you hear something going on inside that's causing you a little concern, and you don't barge in unless it's an exigent circumstance. What do? You knock on the door, you wait for your teen to invite you in, you walk in, and then you have a discussion with them. Spying is when you look through the keyhole of the door and you're watching and hearing everything that's going on the other side of the door without consent and knowledge of your child, right? Like, I don't think parents should be spying on their kids when it comes to social media. But what I do think we should be doing is monitoring with consent and knowledge of the child that we're doing that. And then once the child proves to you that they're being a good digital citizen, then remove the monitoring, right? Because they've earned that right. But I concur with you. Like, it is amazing how many times you do this as an investigator in policing. Now that I'm retired, I still do investigations in the private world. But it is simply amazing to me when I talk to parents, how many of them say to me, like, I had no idea my kid was doing this on their devices. Had no idea. Purposely.
I don't even know what the app is that's on the phone.
Right.
It's you ask them about TikTok. You ask them about Ask FM. You and I know what that was like a few years back.
What are some of the impacts of bullying you have seen in both youth and adults, right? Like, we hear about youth a lot, but what about the adults? So let's hear what your observations have been.
Well, youth are easy for me to kind of monitor because I kind of feel like I'm a big brother to thousands of young people because they add me to Instagram. And I love that because I'll, at night, maybe when I'm just about to fall asleep, I'll scroll through, my I don't know what's called, not the inbox, but the feed, start to see everyone. Yeah. And I'll look at the language the youth are using. I'll look at the photos or the memes that they're putting out there. And I won't hesitate to privately message them without embarrassing or anything like that and just say, listen, I'm not angry at you, but maybe you should just reconsider the way you worded that last message. Or maybe you should consider thinking about the fact that, 3 or 4 years from now, you're going to be looking for a job and your potential employer is going to see this post. You think they're going to hire you or even let you know that they've seen this post? Like, they're not going to give you the benefit of the doubt and say, hey, Darren, I came across this post from 3 years ago. Do you want to explain yourself before I bring you in for an interview? Yeah. They're just the page and going to the next applicant. So I kind of do that big brother thing. So the youth is it's interesting. And the final thing about youth I'll say is that I find it interesting because There are some posts out there I've seen from young people that they are posting something that is so extremely inappropriate with the language, the vulgarity, the meme, the insinuation, the racism tones, sexist tones, what have you. And I'm thinking, where are the adults in your life? This is public. It's not even like they have to be spying or monitoring.
Yeah.
Why aren't they the ones that are calling you out and say, listen, you stop that immediately? It's but now the adults, God bless them. It's to be a youth and to be a cyberbully as a youth, you don't have to look very far where they're learning how to be a bully, especially on the internet. I mean, I think the best time of year or the worst time of year, depending on how you want to phrase it, is when elections come around.
Oh, we'll talk more about that a little bit later, Tad, for sure.
Take a look at what's posted. It's I'm so perplexed that adults haven't learned yet that young people are looking up to us as mentors, as idols. They want to be who we are. And now that they're putting stuff on the internet, kids are seeing that and they're believing that that's perfectly acceptable. I mean, look, my aunt did it, my mom did it, my dad did it, my grandparents did it. So there's no lessons to be learned. There's only the motivation to be just like them. And so you don't have to look very far of where bullying is coming from.
Next question I have for you, and this is a question that I've been looking forward to. As a member of the LGBT plus community, have you had to deal with bullying both privately and publicly as a serving police officer? And what do you do when you find yourself in these situations? I mean, I'll let you talk a little bit more about who you are and what your life is and stuff. But I know that in your role in policing, given the culture that policing has been in, we're changing. I think this is an interesting question because I think, again, how you handle it and what you do could be somewhat of a model for others, right?
Yeah, and thank you for that, because I'm just trying to be the best self that I can be, and a part of that is I am openly gay, and I'm a part of the LGBTQ plus family. Very proud. I wear a pride pin on my uniform when I'm at work. I also wear a pride bracelet. It's important for me to be open like that and live my life. I'm fully prepared for the moments that there is going to be some intolerance, some ignorance, some uneducated comments or behaviors that are going to come my way. But with that said, I haven't really experienced very much. In fact, it's pretty interesting because you have communities, I'll stick to what I know. You have the gay community saying, you know what, we need more representation when it comes to policing. So I look at myself and I think, okay, I'm trying to be the best self I can. I'm open. I speak about it. I don't hide it, whether it's in the office, in my car, or out in the field. But yet it's interesting that when I'm open, I have had comments of, well, you're a traitor. You know, they're just showing you off. The police are trying to pretend like, you know, look at what we've did. We've got the gay guy now, so it's all good. Ironically, I don't recall any negative issues that I've ever experienced in my professional working career with the police, ever. I've never seen it.
So having said that, how do you deal with those in your community now who are now confronting you as a traitor? Because like it or not, that's a form of bullying, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the part that sometimes it takes a lot for me to separate myself from the working Tad to the private Tad.
Right.
To not take it personally and recognize that at the end of the day, my knowledge, the vast majority of which, as does the general public, it comes from the media. And if the media wants to report things about, we need more representation in the community. So and that takes time. It takes time for people to have the courage to apply. It takes time to get the representation in policing and out on the streets. But then if the media decides that next we're going to start saying, well, you know what, it's we need more, or we don't have enough, or it's, they're allowing the voice to the few that are saying, well, they're just a traitor. They're just being paraded around. It's hard. And I'll be honest with you and say the the most difficult comments I've received are actually from members of my own community that I'm out there trying to represent and trying to help and trying to be a role model and a leader amongst. It's actually from my own community. So that's where I've got to take that step back and recognize that the vast majority of LGBTQ people and allies are very appreciative of members such as myself.
Do you find that other members in the LGBT community across Canada who you've met are facing the same thing that you just said there, where they're getting more pushback from their own community than maybe within the department?
Yes, because it's a very isolated group, or groups depending on the day, that are getting their voice heard. And when the media decides that they want to latch on to a particular group or message, that's all they're going to share. And that's what can make it very difficult and confusing for people, is because when you start hearing it over and over and over again, you really believe it as being the whole truth and nothing but the truth, when in fact there are other perspectives, there are other sides, there's more information and details that need to be learned. But
and are those in your community who are saying this to you, are they willing to sit down to discuss this with you about your thoughts on this? Like, how do you deal with that when you're confronted with that?
Well, I'll give you one particular case without breaching anyone's privacy. It happened several years ago. It was a same-sex couple were having a physical domestic violent incident between the two. I happened to be one of the attending members. One of the individuals that called us for help was very clearly the aggressor. They were arrested by myself for assault, and right away, the expletives and the cruel names started coming, such as I'm homophobic. I'm only doing this because he's gay. And so right away, I was being labeled as homophobic because I was wearing the uniform and I was arresting a member of the gay community, when in fact that's not at all what was happening. It was there were two people involved, but one is the aggressor. One committed, alleged at that point anyways, a criminal code offense. So I arrested them. And when I said to him, my reaction, because I was kind of at first thinking, my gosh, I've never been called homophobic before. And I said, you know what, sometimes you need to be a little bit more aware of your audience. And I showed him my wristbands, my Pride wristband. And then that's when it turned to being, I'm a traitor. I'm not really gay. I'm just wearing it just to try fitting in. But again, you and I know, I mean, in our line of work, Darren, we're going to be called everything. And that's what sometimes helps an offender or the responsible party for something negative to feel better, is by pointing fingers and say, well, it's your fault. I'm in this position because you, the cop, you're the one that's put me in this position. Instead of thinking, you know what, hey, I've actually done something wrong here. The police would never have entered my life if it weren't for my actions and somebody calling the police to come to help. And the fact that just because you're in handcuffs and charged with an offense doesn't mean that, you're going to have a criminal record, found guilty, or any of those things. It's just the start of a process, and you're going to be brought before a neutral party, being the judge, to determine guilt or innocence.
Tad, if there's one thing I can share with you, what you just shared with me there in the past 5 minutes, you should write an article. You should write an article on that specific issue, right? About how you're finding a bigger challenge and being challenged. Like, I think that would be a great article. Like, that's the first time I've ever heard anybody from your community who's in policing share that with me. And because I'm thinking, wow, I never even thought about that. But what you've just shared with me is that is common amongst other colleagues of yours across Canada, where I just think that would be a really good article for you to write on in depth and share with others, both inside and outside of the law enforcement community. Just an idea, but I think it would, and I know how much you love writing now.
Yes. And
Next question I have for you, Tad. But seriously, I'm serious on that, my friend. That would be just a really good article, I think. Next question I have for you. How do you balance your professional life, policing, with your other professional life, which is presenting, and your personal life? Like, how do you do it? You're a one-man show, right?
That is where it kind of goes back to what you and I were saying at the very start. If you're passionate about something, that's all you need. You don't need, because I don't look at, I mean, I'm passionate about policing. I love policing. I love every minute of wearing that uniform. So it's not work to me. And then I absolutely love the feeling of sharing my story, knowing that it might help someone. I may never know, but I know it's going to help somebody in that room. I just may never know who they are or how it helped. So that's passion there as well. So it's not a job. It's not work. It's just, sometimes it's bigger than me. And I think when it comes to looking as an outsider to what I do can be very difficult for people. They think, oh, like you're basically doing 2 full-time jobs. And my argument is I don't have any jobs. I have things that I love and I do them, just like someone might have a hobby or, a sport that they play. This is what I thoroughly enjoy doing. And I think that things have grown, especially from the bullying against here aspect, to such a level that it's bigger than me now. And I know I've made some sacrifices. I'm very open about that as far as my personal life when it comes to dating or relationships or that sort of thing, because who wants to date me? I'm never around, or even when I am around, I'm thinking I'm in a different headspace. And if it's not because I brought work home with me, as you full well know, Darren, how that happens, and you're in that headspace of, could I have done that call differently? Is there more I can do when I go into the office tomorrow? How would I do it differently next time? Then I'm thinking, okay, so how do I do bullying ends here? How can I grow it? How can I start leaving that legacy piece? Because although it is just me, I do have to prepare for when that day comes that either I'm unable to do it or I'm not around to do it. I still want the positive to be there. I don't want it to be a sad story. Tad's passed away. I want it to be, look at what Tad did. We can take away from his story. There's resources when it comes to bullying. There's connections that he's made. There are books. There's clothing. There's all these things. So it's not difficult when it's a passion.
What does Tad do when he has me time to decompress? Is Puppy around? Is your puppy around right now, or you got him locked out of your room right now?
No, she is around. She's not feeling well the last few days, so that's been a little trying. She's getting up there in age. She's going to be 9 years old next month, but she's quite petite. So
what does Tad do in his me time to decompress?
I sleep. I absolutely love being alone. I love it. I love it to the point that people around me think that I'm lonely. So, for instance, I go out in the summer. I have a kind of like a summer getaway. I have an RV, and it's not camping by any means, Darren. I'm telling you, I'm glamping all the way. But it's my Tad space, because the summer I don't really do presentations for the most part. I leave things off in June so that they can kind of go stagnant for a couple of months. I still do all my connections with youth, but it really frees up a substantial amount of time. But my friends at the trailer park, because I'm always by myself, they're like, oh, I feel like I need to invite them for dinner. Oh, we need to do movies. Oh, what are we going to do? And I'm sitting there going, I just want to be alone. So that's what I do. I take good care of myself. I'm always in tune with my mental wellness and illness when it veers its negative head for me. I reach out and I talk and I talk about it at work with my peers. I make sure that I'm creating an environment around me that people know they're comfortable to talk about. It's okay to talk about it with each other. It's okay to talk about it with me if you'd like. And Darren, you know full well that sometimes in this line of work we see a lot of terrible things. Sometimes that's all we ever see because that's what we get called to. No one calls us because there's a really cool event going on down the street. We only get the whole, my neighbor's doing bad things. I heard screaming. I've been harmed. I've just come across something that's really, really terrible. That's what you and I see all the time. So it's really, really important as police officers, as first responders, we take that step back and recognize this world is still so full of love and kindness. Even though that's not what I see for 12 hours out of my day, I only see the negative. I need to understand it's only because that is my job. That is what I do for the 12 hours. I've got to recognize there's so much more love and positivity in this world than anyone's ever truly going to understand.
Next question, my friend. In a tweet you stated, helping to create change must go beyond sharing a post on social media. It must go beyond pointing fingers. Creating change starts with you. For far too long, our friends of color have struggled to be heard, to feel safe, or to even stay alive. Given current events, can you please share with our audience the why of this tweet?
Darren, I've seen it. I've experienced it. I've heard it. Our friends, our neighbors, our family of color, just what they have gone through for generations, what they continue to go through today is unfathomable. And I think, and I'm hoping that what's happening today, the civil unrest, the social messages being put out, I hope this is a wave that continues. I hope it continues for the better. I hope we start to see some equality. I hope this change comes. I'm also a realist to know it's not going to happen overnight. But the part that really troubles me is, and this goes back to what we spoke about earlier, is that it's really, really, really easy to point fingers and to cast blame on others and say that's where the problem is. The problem is there. Look at it. It's the institution. It's the government. It's the schools. The real difficult part to understand is that what you just listed are buildings. It's infrastructure. It's the people inside those institutions in society that are creating these issues. It's great on Bell Let's Talk Day to do the hashtag for mental illness. It's terrific. But if you're not following it up for 364 days out of the year, if you aren't following it up with more than a hashtag, then all it was just a hashtag. You can't pat yourself on the back at the end of the day and go, hey, I did something about it. It defeats the purpose of what the Bell Let's Talk Day is. It's meant to inspire conversation.
Or a pink shirt.
Or a pink shirt day for one day out of the year. Again, it starts with hearts of gold. I mean, what Travis Price and his buddy back in the day did to start Pink Shirt Day, and as you know, I wear a pink shirt every single day out of the year, especially when I'm presenting, and that's on purpose. It's on purpose because it shouldn't be a one day out of the year conversation. The reason for the 1 days are to create the conversation. And with what we're seeing right now, I'm seeing a whole lot of finger pointing saying it's them, it's them, it's them. I don't see a whole lot of reflection in the mirror about what can I possibly do more than a meme, more than a hashtag, more than a sharing of a social media post. What can I do every day? Well, you can get out, you can support.
What are some of those things you've seen come out of what has happened over the past little while that you've kind of stepped back and went, yeah, right on. Like what have you seen? Because you're right. I don't think we're going to be able to say, tomorrow we start anew, right? There's going to be changes over time. But what are some of those things that you're seeing coming out of this movement?
People listening, actually listening and wanting to try to place themselves, as difficult as it may be, in the speaker's shoes. What must it feel like to walk down the streets at 11 o'clock at night in darkness, being a person of color, thinking that any given moment someone may call the police on me because I look suspicious? And now I can also follow that up being a police officer. And this is a part that troubles me a lot is I work downtown Calgary, so it's a bit of an environment that's different from a lot of other environments. But I would say on an average shift of 12 hours, Darren, I probably go to at least 10 calls of unwanted people that are sitting on a bench, sleeping in the park, sitting in a doorway. I'm very open to say that the vast majority of those calls are our First Nations brothers and sisters. Yeah. People are calling the police to tell someone to move along. And I have no hesitation in asking the caller, well, what is it you would like the police to do? And more often than not, I hear, no word of a lie, I don't care. I just want them moved.
I hear this. I heard the same thing when I was in policing.
Oh, Darren, it breaks my heart. These individuals are the very first to say they're being harassed by police. And I very much understand, because when you listen to them and you put yourself in their shoes, they are. they are being harassed by police. But the part that's missing is that the reason why the police are in their lives is because someone in the public called the police to take care of this, if for lack of better words. And police, we don't have a choice. We can't pick and choose what calls we're going to go to. Again, it goes back to liability, goes back to social responsibility, goes back to what our job, our oaths are, is to go and help people. So I have to go along to that person and say, hey, listen, I recognize you don't have a place to go. I recognize you're down on your luck. But I'll be honest with you, someone has called me and told me that you need to move along. So respectfully, I have to ask you just that. So it puts the police in an absolutely incredibly difficult spot, because you can call me police and separate me from the uniform as much as you like, but the fact is I'm still a human being. Yeah. I was homeless as a young person. I was down on my luck. I am a member of the gay community, so I know, not trying to even say that I know what it's like to be a person of color, but I have a sense of understanding of what it must be like to be judged and be fearful of who you are, for the fact that someone might come up behind you and do something, cruel or mean.
Do you find, I mean, you've traveled across Canada, Europe, the United States. Do you find it's different here in Canada compared to other countries that you've been to, or is it the same?
Well, I mean, I guess I have a lot more connection to London, England. I've spent an incredible amount of time there. There are people of color. I'm sure they have just as many struggles as here. But I think the difference is here I notice it a lot more when it comes to our Indigenous brothers and sisters. It's rampant. It's everywhere. I see it when I walk down the street, whether I'm in a uniform or just in plain clothes, just out to go get groceries. I see it. And one thing, Darren, that you may have seen I did is, just before the pandemic hit, I started thinking, I want to give a voice to those that are sitting on the sidewalk, that are sleeping on the streets, that are sitting there with a can or a hat or a cup in front, asking for spare change. I started sitting down with them just for short, 2-3 minutes. As far as the video is concerned, I sat with them for half an hour to an hour sometimes, and I would ask them, "What would you like the world to know about you? What do you wish the people that are walking past you, not even looking at you right now, in fact, they're purposely taking 3 steps away from you to walk around to then loop back to where they were. What do you wish they knew about you?" And I have to say that I kind of already knew the answers a little bit, because that's the type of person I am in the line of work as well. I'll ask criminals. I will ask those with addictions. I will ask the homeless. Like, is there a moment in your life that you can remember back where kind of things went a way that you wish they hadn't? And everybody has oh yes, they know. But the part that I struggled with, that really took me aback, and I started doing this program called Everybody Matters. It started in Ottawa, and I remember the first person I sat with him. His name was Scott. I sat with him for about an hour. And I felt like I was absolutely hated by sitting there. I felt the same way that Scott felt every single day. People, they would look at you several meters away to know that you're up ahead, that you're there, but then they put their head down and they pretend like all of a sudden, for the next 15 seconds of my life, as I keep walking, I'm going to pretend that I didn't see any of this. I'm going to pretend they don't exist. I'm going to keep walking. I felt the way people look down at those that are sitting there and thinking, but if you just took a moment out of your day and realized their story, realized their struggles, realizing yes, maybe that person has an addiction, maybe you've seen them do something terrible in the past, but at the end of the day, they're still a human being. They're somebody's child. They're loved by somebody. And again, kind of all encompassing to everything we've been speaking about today, people are very quick to say, well, we need more supports. We need more housing. We need more of this, that, and another thing. But my question back, kind of going to that self-reflection, would be, so what are you as an individual doing to help the crisis? What have you as an individual done to help that person that you just walked by thinking, well, society needs to do more to help them? You are society. So what did you do?
You know,
and that's
it's
the
I've
question
been
I always
retired
ask
for 4 years, and much like you, my 30-year career, most of it, all of it, was in uniform. I never went to the DO office. I always stayed in uniform, front line, on the small stint up in the internal. But I always took time to sit down with our street. I call them the family, right? The street population, and every one of them had a story.
Yes.
Every one of them had a story, and I think, and I know you're familiar with the Odd Squad in Vancouver, and the documentary they did, Behind the Blue Lens, right, where they interviewed the people in the skids there about their stories and all that. Powerful stuff, right?
Yeah.
Powerful stuff. So what are you doing with? So you did that. You started in Ottawa. How many more did you do?
I did a total of 23. I only aired 2 when the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
And the whole point of it was encouraging people to sit, just even for a moment or two, just sit and talk to someone that's less fortunate than ourselves. But I didn't want to keep going with that series during the pandemic because it kind of goes against what people are supposed to be doing with sitting close in the space. So I put it on pause, and I'm just waiting for it to be, because they're the most vulnerable in every way, shape, and form in society. They're the most vulnerable, and I didn't want to encourage people, even though they'd be doing it for the right reasons, to do the wrong thing currently, and that's to sit with them and start talking. So I put a pause.
As we come out of this thing, I think we're going to be in it until this time next year, to be quite honest, right? I think we're in for it for the long haul, but I look forward to more episodes coming up because I think it's powerful, right? I think it's really powerful. But I really love your comment when I asked you, what have you seen as one of the biggest positive coming out this, was people are listening.
Yeah.
They're finally listening now. And they're not just listening just to give the ear, just to say that they've done it. I like you, I'm believing that not only are they listening, but they're internalizing it and starting to take some actions now, right? Which is kind of, and I do believe out of this, policing as a profession is going to be better, right? Like I really do believe that, and I think society as a whole will be better. We'll see, but I don't have a crystal ball, but I think that's what's going to happen.
I think so too. I agree. I just look forward to the day that police are held to account as they should be. I'm all for that. I'm the first one for accountability to scream, we need to be held accountable. But I look forward to the day that the pendulum swings a little bit more than the pointing fingers at institutions, thinking that's where the problems are. I'm encouraged to hear people in the sporting world come forward and say what they've experienced in sports. I'm encouraged by the people in government who are coming forward and talk about their stories that they experienced, in government, because this isn't limited to policing or institutions or governments or schools or anything. As I said earlier, it's human beings. That's where racism comes from. It's from individuals that are taught how to be racist. And I'll very briefly say to you, Darren, I watched a really, really good movie the other day. I'm not going to tell you the name of it. It just came out, and it was about 2 white pilots and 4 terrorists on the plane. And the terrorists take over the plane and do a whole bunch of terrible things. And, the movie ends with, the way the movie ends. I don't want to give it away in case someone knows. The point to my story is that how come you already know in your mind what the terrorist looks like? Because I didn't describe them. I would like to think that the people watching this video right now, they don't have a friend that's a terrorist. So how do you already know what the terrorists of that movie look like? Well, you'd be right with there, because the terrorists were people of color on that plane, which I don't understand why. I thought we were past this of kind of typecasting who should play a role in a movie. There was no reason why these 4 terrorists had to be people of color. I sit back, and that was the first thing I saw. So for me, on a personal level, I remember thinking that I'm starting to hear what people are saying from their experiences, because now I'm starting to see it. I'm seeing it when I watch a movie. I'm starting to see how society is led to believe and have these subconscious thoughts without even realizing it, because that's what we're taught. We're taught it in movies. We're taught it in video games. We're taught it everywhere we go. Mm-hmm. So that's where we need to start listening and start to do that. So on a personal level, that's one of the things I've noticed that started to change for me. Is I still have a lot more listening to do. Don't get me wrong, as a human being, I do, but I'm starting to see the results of the listening because now I'm starting to see.
Last question I have for you, Tad. You stated you don't have to look far for where cyberbullying is coming from. Look at what grown adults post on the internet each day. Our kids are watching, and you're their mentor. This message, although true, is challenging when one of the most powerful men in the world uses their social media as a weapon. How do you answer youth who surely bring this to your attention? I mean, I hear this in my presentations, right? Where, you tell us not to do this, but the most powerful man in the world does it, and look where he is. He became president of it. He's staying as president. He's getting everything he wants. Like, why should I want what he has? And if that worked for him, then I'm going to do the same thing. Because if it worked for him, it's going to work for me. Like, if I had hair to pull out, Tad, I would do it, right? But like,
and I'm glad you left this question to the end, because the headache it gives me just at the thought, and I'm not, anything that I have to say from this point forward has nothing to do with politics. It has to do with influence. And this individual that you speak of is arguably the most powerful person in the world. I think it's fair to say this individual has the largest audience around the world right now. And the things that I have seen this individual put on the internet, to say at a podium, to share in whatever platform that they have at that moment, it's there are no words to describe. I honestly thought that we were getting better as a society with not only, as we touched on, with listening, but hearing. But I thought we were also getting a lot better at, representing and being a leader amongst ourselves. We don't have to be the president of the United States to be a leader. In fact, you don't have to be termed a leader to actually be a leader, meaning like you don't have to be the chief of the police to be the leader of the police. Anyone can be a leader. And I do get a lot of kids, you're right, over the last couple of years message and say, can you believe he said that? Can you believe this is what he's putting out? And I've gotten to the point of a lot of reflection and thinking, what would I ever say if I was afforded an opportunity to speak to the president? And would I even take that opportunity? The first one is yes, I would take the opportunity, because I'm a firm believer in no matter what you've done, no matter what you said, no matter who you are, you've still got a chance. Communication is always going to be the way. So I would take the opportunity to sit with the president privately, no videos, no cameras, no recording devices, and just talk, and just talk about the damage that's being done, because the very definition of bullying, of who the bully is exactly what this individual is doing. It's the repetition, the power, and the intent to shame, harm, embarrass. Look no further than the names he seems to have for absolutely anyone he's speaking about. But the fact is, no matter how embarrassing, no matter how shameful, no matter how hurtful some of his messages are to people or groups in society, the fact of the matter is we can't control him. There's only one person in life we have any sort of control over, and that's ourselves. And that's where true leadership has to begin. We have to understand that we're going to see things in our lifetime that aren't right. And hopefully, with a clear and rational mind, we'll be able to reflect on ourselves at the end of the day when we unwind and unpack what we did and experienced and heard and said throughout the day, to know that when I wake up tomorrow, I'm going to have learned from all those experiences, and I'm going to be better. I'm going to be a leader in the things that I do, and the things that I say, and the ways I live my life, starting even better tomorrow when I wake up. And if there is a positive from what's happening with this individual, with what he says on social media, is that maybe we can learn what we don't want to be doing on social media. We don't have to look very far for an example to say, whatever you do, don't do that. So you got to try to take the positive out of everything. As you know, I'm a bit of an expert on that part, Darren, and that is we take away the fact we can't change what he does, but we can certainly change what we do in hopes of creating a better world for tomorrow.
Oh, and I think there's karma. I really do. I really do. And we'll see what happens. But Tad, any final thoughts on anything we covered? Any last message you want to share with our audience before we close out?
You know what? I think a great way to sum up everything that I've had to say, it's is the same way that I end every presentation. I always say this, and you know already, Darren, is that I challenge whoever is watching this right now that at the end of today, go and look at yourself in the mirror, and without thinking of anything external in your day, just ask yourself, was I the very best person that I could have been today? Take out all the noise you heard, take out all the things you've read, take out all the angering moments that were told upon you today, and just reflect upon, was I the very best person I could have been today? And then that's when you challenge yourself that, you know what, tomorrow when I wake up, tomorrow I'm going to have learned from what I experienced yesterday, and tomorrow I'm going to be better. Tomorrow I'm going to reach out and I'm going to speak up on someone's behalf. I'm going to reach out on my own behalf. I'm going to do something to make tomorrow a better world for all of us to live.
Wow. Tad, hold tight. I want to debrief you after we're done here. I'm just going to go into my closing now. So, like, wow, right? Like, that's why I love Tad. He's a brother, right? Like, he really is. And I love his passion. I mean, some of the things we discussed got pretty deep. And I appreciate that as somebody who's conducting an interview, because that's basically what we're doing here in the show, and talking to people to get their perspective on life and everything to do with life. But again, what I love about Tad is his passion, how he brings that passion to what he does with Bullying Ends Here, but also in his job in policing, right? I think you heard a lot about that and how that's a part, because like it or not, it is a part of who he is. It's much like when I was a policing, it was a part of who I was, right? So, you know, it's gratifying to see that people who are still wearing the badge in law enforcement are people like Tad, right? And really internalizing and listening what's going on. And I think the vast majority of that profession is doing that as well. But boy, it really surprised me when we talked about some of the issues that he was facing, because I thought he was going to say, yeah, he's faced controversy or ignorance in the profession of policing, but really he said no. And Tad, I know you're still listening. You got to write an article on that, my friend, because I just think that would be powerful. So on behalf of myself, Darren, Brandon, who's working in the booth behind us right now, controlling all this stuff and making everything happen here here at the White Hatter, I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and I look forward to our next Thinkable Thursday.